Hi, this is Ann Hill from Dream Talk Radio, and today I have part two of the series of interviews that I'm doing for this great series of books. It's called Lucid Dreaming, New Perspectives on Consciousness in Sleep. And last month I interviewed the editors, Ryan Hurd and Kelly Bulkley, and also three of the contributors who each wrote a chapter of the book. This month we're taking volume 2, which is Religion, Culture, and Creativity, and we're talking to not just Ryan Hurd, but we'll see. I'll just cycle through. So there's Ryan Hurd, and then from way far away there's Dr. Clare Johnson, and we have Shayne Dahl and Dr. Fariba Bogzaran. So welcome everybody to this hangout. I'm so glad you could make it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Ryan, I'll start with you, and can you just set us up here and talk about the project and specifically what your intention was behind this really fascinating and vivid volume of articles?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us for this second call. And something that Kelly Bulkley in the last call mentioned was that when we were sorting through 30-plus chapters of different topics on lucid dreaming, we were presented with the difficulty of having to bifurcate them into a 2-volume set, and the challenges that would make. And we went through a lot of different ways, and in some ways, some of the chapters could have ended up in either of the volumes. But it worked out rather nicely, and I think in the second volume, which deals with issues of religion and culture and creativity, but also history, and of course spirituality and anthropology. There's a sort of a more subjective, personal take to some of these chapters. A lot of the chapter authors include their own dreams as they discuss their research, and it feels more integrative, and also there's just a tremendous variability of the kinds of experiences that people are talking about, from the stuff that Shayne will be discussing with his fieldwork experiences, to Claire's personal research with creativity, to Fariba's amazing process through the decades with art and lucid dreaming. It's an incredible range, and it's difficult to grasp. It's difficult for me to hold it all and say, I can't believe we're talking about the same topic here. This is about lucid dreaming, which really goes to show just how amazing and multi-dimensional this topic is in the beginning.
And also, I mean, it's amazing to me that there's this many people studying it from different angles and looking at different aspects of it, and all these different cultural approaches. I mean, one thing I'd love to do, maybe like the third in this series, I would love to get together some of the folks who've done these great studies of different cultural uses and beliefs around lucid dreaming, because that, I think, is something that's in both volumes. It'd be really worthwhile to look at more.
Absolutely, and actually the cultural dimensions of lucidity was one of the original ideas of pulling this anthology together in the first place, because it's something that you don't often hear or read about in the mainstream press, and when people talk about lucid dreaming research, there's not too much of an awareness of the cultural variability of dreams in general, that people could experience dreaming in different ways and act upon them in different ways, incubate dreams, bring them in, and just have that feedback system, and how important culture is as an intermediary between the self and the dreaming mind. And so, right, so and that's something that Shayne for sure can talk about, but it's something that is often missing, I think, in the discussions of the psychology or the science. There's, we miss the culture.
Great. Well, okay, so thanks for that introduction. Let's just jump right in, and I'm just kind of going from the front to the back of the book. So Clare, you're up first. Clare Johnson, can you want to just share a little bit about your background and what got you into this subject, and a little bit of what your chapter is about?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I mean, I've been into lucid dreaming for very many years. I had my first lucid dream when I was 3, and I've had thousands over the years. And so I decided to do a PhD on lucid dreaming and the creative process. And for the PhD, I wrote 2 lucid dream inspired novels, Breathing in Color and Dream Runner. And I drew on my lucid dreams to help me to write those novels. And it's interesting what you just said about there being so many different perspectives on lucid dreaming, because I've just come tonight from a book club meeting. They'd read Breathing in Color, so they invited me along. And I'm in Germany, and it may be different in the States, but in Germany, some people, just they don't know that much about lucid dreaming. So I had all sorts of questions, from the very basic ones about what is lucid dreaming to what can you do with lucid dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's a topic which I find absolutely passionate, because there are so many things you can do with lucid dreaming, and not just the creativity which I focused on for my PhD, but so many other things. Healing is another very fascinating topic for me, and yes, I'm just exploring all sorts of aspects of it. And in my chapter, Magic, Meditation and the Void, Creative Dimensions of Lucid Dreaming, I talk also about meditation in lucid dreams, and how we can enter altered states in lucid dreams, and how this can also enhance our waking lives.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about the void. I mean, I be, having been around this kind of crew of folks a while, I got what you were saying, and what that so anyway, can you just sort of spell out what the void is, and why we should care, why we should be in curious about it, rather than a little bit, put off by it.
Well, some people are put off by the void. Basically, I mean, the void is a term that lucid dreamers use to describe the sensation of floating in what appears to be infinite space. It could be black space, it could be luminous space. And some people find this very worrying, because they think, well, where am I? How do I get into a normal dream again? They might feel they have no body, so they have this sensation of bodilessness. So it can be quite a strange experience to start with. And the void can also involve sensations which seem quite strange, like being flung around through space. So some people say, this was a scary experience, I don't want to have it again. But in fact, it is also a responsive space. So if you're scared in any kind of dream space, things are not necessarily going to improve, because the dream space reacts to you. And so if you learn, which I did through having so many of these experiences when I was at university, if you learn to relax and just say, okay, I'm in this space, it's strange, but it's also kind of fascinating, and go with the flow of it, then you can find really very beautiful experiences. And it's the perfect place to meditate, because you don't have your physical body, which is so distracting, or you always have aches and pains when you sit down to meditate. You start realizing, my back's a bit uncomfortable, or I've got an itch on my cheek, whatever it is, the body distracts you. But in that space, in that lucid suspension, you don't have any of these distractions, and so that enables you to go into a very deep meditative experience, and it can lead to experiences of oneness, so non-dual experiences, total interconnectedness, and a sense of freedom, expansiveness, and this carries over into waking life. It's very refreshing having that sort of experience in the void.
That's a really good point. Your knees don't ache. And if they do, you're wondering, why are my knees aching? I'm lucid in my dream. I'm lying down. They shouldn't. I'm not. But this also brings up one interesting point that I wanted to ask you about. And in your article, you talk about the different types of control. I mean, the idea of just sort of letting go and or just having some sort of sporadic control, like uh, uh, um, making things happen in your dream and then sort of sitting back and seeing what happens. And you also make the great point that just being aware that we are dreaming changes the dream content. And I think there's been this idea about lucid dreaming that lucid dreaming is when you can sort of take control of your dream. And we've done a pretty good job, I feel like, over the past couple interviews to debunk that a little bit. But I wanted to talk more about, like, how does being aware that we are dreaming change or alter or affect in any way the content of the dream?
It changes it in all sorts of ways. For example, if you have a nightmare and you become lucid in the nightmare, often simply the act of becoming conscious and knowing that this is a dream environment, it can diminish your fear. And when your fear is diminished, then the nightmare image would also change and transform, usually into something, a lot more positive. So that's one way in which it can really change the dream. And I think this the whole issue of control in lucid dreams is it's a fascinating one. I mean, you can never control every aspect of the dream, and that's one thing that I think some people overlook. And I still get into conversations these days with psychoanalysts, for example, who say, "Oh, lucid dreaming is all about control, and that goes against the grain of psychoanalysis, and it's all about the ego taking control." But it really doesn't have to be like that. My PhD research identified 4 different levels of engagement with the lucid dream. And the first 2 are passive ones. One is passive observation, and in that you can just stand in your lucid dream and just watch the beauty of the lucid dream as it unfolds. And that's a very creative state of mind to enter. And I think people perhaps don't consider that when they think about lucid dreams. It's all about the control aspect. And the one thing that I noticed when I was researching passive observation lucid dreams was that simply the gaze of the lucid dreamer can alter the dream content. So whether or not you're trying to change and alter the lucid dream seems irrelevant, because it's such a thought responsive environment that as soon as you have an emotion or a judgmental thought, then the dream will respond. And in one dream I became lucid standing in some woods, and I looked around. I thought, I'm not going to alter anything, I'm just going to see what happens in this dream. And I noticed a red buttercup. Red buttercup, okay. And I deliberately didn't think buttercup shouldn't be red. I looked away and just kind of carried on, and I looked back and the buttercup had turned yellow. So the dream had reacted to my unspoken thought or assumption that this was actually the wrong color, and it had turned it into the right color. So the lucid gaze changes the dream content, whether we want to control anything or not. And so the idea of giving an impulse to the dream, this sort of sporadic control, I call it, that can be extremely creative and absolutely wonderful, just to give an initial input, like say, what should I do for my next piece of artwork? Just ask a question, to the dream, and then wait and see what the dream comes up with. I mean, it's so spontaneous and surprising that it's just wonderful to see what happens. So I think that's a very nice level of engagement. Yeah.
So that would mean patience. How do you spell that? I'm not familiar with this concept.
Yes. Yeah, I guess.
Thanks for that. That's a great introduction. And if people want to know more about, the 4 types of engagement, they can pick up this book and read your article, is what I think they can do.
That's right. Oh, someone actually contacted me today to say that they just read this chapter in this book. They're going through all the chapters, and he decided to try to meditate in a lucid dream. And he remembered what I said about closing your eyes so you don't get too distracted by all this incredible dream imagery that comes up. And he did. He closed his eyes and he started to meditate, and immediately he heard a voice saying, "Your unconscious can kill you."
Oh.
And so he wrote to me on Facebook and said, "Oh, how would you, do you think, can you make some comments on this?" And I said, "Well, if it were my dream, the guy would have said, your unconscious can kill and it can cure, because the unconscious can do both. If you look at illness, the way that illness is generated in the body by unresolved traumas or blocks and so on, then you can get ill, in a sense, from things that are not being released from the unconscious. And conversely, the unconscious can cure. And this is why, another reason why I love lucid dreaming, because if you enter into this deep conscious conversation with your dreaming mind, then you can heal yourself in various ways. So I think there's just so much more to explore with this all.
Well, this is a really good segue to our next contributor, Shayne Dahl, who has done some fascinating work. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, Shayne, and what your chapter talks about.
Yeah, so I started a master's program at Trent University in 2010. And I proposed to do ethnographic research on the Blood Indian Reserve in southwestern Alberta, exploring the possible application of lucid dreaming in shamanism.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't so sure if there was any direct application of lucid dreaming in shamanistic practice, but I had, over the course of maybe 6 years, developed a pretty strong relationship with the community out there. And I remember actually the very first time I asked about dreams when I was on the reserve. I went to a sweat lodge. I'm sure you're all familiar with a sweat lodge. And I was I was like 20 years old, and I asked the medicine man, I said, I had this dream of a wolf. What does it mean? And he just looked at me, he's like, I think you're going to win the lottery. Buy a ticket. But yeah, anyway, as the years progressed and I became closer with a community out there, I realized the significance of dreams, and I thought there's not much written about it, and it would be really amazing to go research it. And I had read a fair number of books about the anthropology of dreaming and about lucid dreaming, and I was really excited. I had, I'm an occasional lucid dreamer these days, not so much, but I have a few experiences in the void myself. Having, I remember one dream, I was in my backyard and I unzipped the shed and fell through into a void. I was thinking about that when you were talking, and I just floated there. It didn't bother me too much, but and no voice spoke to me. But yeah, anyway, so I have a long-term interest in dreams, and I did this research project. But when I got to the reserve in the summer of 2011, people were very willing to share with me about dreams, but they're also very, very cautious. And they kept telling me that they're cautious for my own good. And I didn't quite understand, I didn't take them that seriously. I was a bit skeptical because it's just dreams after all, right? But they live in a totally different, they have a totally different philosophy of what it means to dream. Because it's not just your psychology, it's your soul departing from your body into a spirit realm that is populated by kind spirits who will help you if you are willing to make the appropriate sacrifice. And it's also filled with, I call pathogenic beings who kind of want to suck the life force out of you and or your family members. And so when I first was asking about dreams in a more in-depth way for my research, they were very cautious because they knew that by exposing me to that level of information about dreaming, they were also going to kind of open me up to become vulnerable to both forces. And so through my fieldwork, which wasn't very long actually at that particular time, it was about a month and a half only, but leading up to that was about 6 years. So I drew on a lot of experience, but the interviewing and stuff like that was really intensive for about a month and a half. But during that short period of time, I had some really amazing and some really terrifying dreams of these kind of negative beings coming after me, and it could have been incubated by all these warnings that I received. Even though I was skeptical, my unconscious just kind of absorbed those threats. And this is one psychological reading of it. But in any case, I had a few nightmares that when I woke up terrified. Like I couldn't go back to sleep. And then a couple days later, I tried to sleep again, and I couldn't sleep because I had another terrifying nightmare of. I don't think I included those nightmares in this chapter that's in the book, but I did write about them in my master's thesis, which can be found on that website there. But I had dreams of being sliced up, like being butchered, and not just that, but also there was one dream I had. It's kind of personal, but this is a Dream Talk Radio, so.
This is just the internet. It's just the internet.
Yeah, just the internet. My students will see this 10 years from now and probably make fun of me in class. But anyway, so I was looking into a mirror, and I saw my face, but it started twitching like really intensely, and kind of it looked really scary. And somehow there was like a voice that was inside that version of me that jumped out of the mirror into my consciousness, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something. The feeling was something of like being possessed by a really evil creature. And from there, I had really I woke up after that, and I had really twisted thoughts about strange urges that I can't really explain, like to do like maybe violent things or to hurt myself or some weird kind of urges which are not normal to me. It took me a long time actually in order to overcome this these series of nightmares and this kind of weird urges to do strange things. I actually had to have a fast. I had to stop. I had to cure it with the kind of Blackfoot methods, and the fasting worked, and so it stopped. But I used all that experience to write my master's thesis. And one of the reasons why some of my informants, some of my Blackfoot informants told me that this was happening to me was because I was sharing knowledge about dreams with an anonymous audience. And the problem with that is that there's no reciprocity between me and the readers of my master's thesis. So I'm kind of taking their secret knowledge and publishing it in a very I think I was on the right side. Like I don't think I overstepped my ethical obligations to everybody on the reserve, but it was very close to the edge of what I was allowed to share and what I was allowed not to. So that anxiety of am I crossing the line here manifested, I think, in these sorts of terrifying nightmares and stuff. So I have a very positive experience of lucid dreaming. As Claire was describing, like I remember before that the research, that was my kind of experience of lucid dreaming. It was very positive and spiritually uplifting. I've had many great lucid dreams. But after that experience, I realized that we operate in a very specific ontology, like a kind of with a very specific approach to reality and our own psychology. That actually I speak about, Roger Lohman and I speak about in our chapter in this volume as well, that lucid dreaming is a cultural variable, like it changes for different people, right? So in our kind of the Western approach to lucid dreaming is very positive, mostly very positive and spiritually uplifting. But if you start to endeavor into the dream worlds of Canadian First Nations people or different societies throughout the world, you're going to there's some other level of understanding that you need to have before you enter it. So my chapter actually stands as a warning against, just diving into with a bit of a romantic or a very overly positive approach to dreaming, because it's not safe for everyone, I don't think. And I included the case of Jared Loughner as well in my chapter as a Western case of somebody interested in lucid dreaming who ended up, becoming a bit psychotic.
Right. Well, the interesting thing to me, one of the interesting things to me about your chapter was just the whole idea of, this is something that most Westerners, maybe I can generalize that much, don't really have an experience of, is being in the container of an existing culture that's so old and that has specific traditions and also specific boundaries around experience and
sharing that experience.
Exactly. And you're right. I mean, there's so many cultures around the world and throughout history that have strictures around how old you need to be. Like I think you mentioned, the midlife type of thing. You have to have a body of experience and a psychic container that can somehow manage and cope with it. And I guess, Mike here, I had another question I was going to ask you, but now I'm actually interested in, like, how that was, like, what was it, just fasting? Like, what was the prescription that you received for dealing with the dreams, the frightening dreams that you were having?
It's really about your personal protection that you have built for yourself against negative forces. And in a Blackfoot spirituality, religion, fasting is a very common way to acquire that protection and acquire that kind of, because you're purifying yourself as well as you're kind of it's a kind of auto-sacrifice, and that's maybe another conversation. But yeah, by fasting, you're kind of empowering yourself. That's, if you look around the world, asceticism is a way of becoming spiritually empowering yourself. So I thought by maybe cleansing my body and my mind for a day or two, I could, and focusing specifically on the problem of let's stop these terrifying dreams, that maybe I could, I smudged as well. Smudging is another way of cleansing your body. I thought if I did that, then I should be well equipped to stop this, because I'm in control. I should not feel like I'm not in control. And I started to lose control, which was, it was good for educational purposes to lose control of my mind a little bit and then gain it back. So I think fasting, that was just a personal choice of mine. It was not. It was not a big formal event. I just decided that's what I should do, because that's the Blackfoot way to cure some kind of ailment.
And last, I want to ask you briefly about the other, this idea of the nocebo, and you talk about this completely other culture and sort of a combination of belief, of mythology, cultural mythology, and genetics. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, that's difficult territory, and that was one of the questions in my my master's thesis defense. That was the big one. The science is still, I think, premature in terms of the placebo effect and the nocebo effect, because to the best of my knowledge, people generally think of the placebo effect as being initiated by a doctor giving a sugar pill instead of a pill with medicinal properties. Now, if you think about the placebo effect works when people believe that this pill has the power to heal them, right? But that's just a pill. That's a very undramatic positive belief. It's just I'm having a pill. But you can imagine the placebo effect that a really intense shamanistic doctoring ceremony with drums pounding, people singing at the top of their lungs. I mean, you can imagine the placebo effect that would have compared to a pill, right? And also, there's dreaming is a very fully embodied experience, so I'm sure that also has a more intense impact than a sugar pill. And it could go either way. It could be a very positive impact, it could be a very negative impact. The scholar that's working on a connection between, like, the relationship between symbolic thought, neurology, and the immune system would be Michael Winkelmann.
Mm.
And he's written about it in his book on shamanism. He's got the second edition in 2010. He goes to the science of the technical science of it. So I would recommend anybody interested in that topic to consult him. I just used that research to suggest that, you know, perhaps dreaming has some powers that we don't understand the full extent of the impact that a positive or a negative dream can have on our immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've got a question for the panel after we go through everybody, and it's kind of tied into that idea, although it's a little bit broader. It's this idea of health and lucid dreaming, or dreaming in general, and health broadly speaking. Mm-hmm. But next I want to bring in our final panelist, Dr. Fariba Bogzaran. And Fariba, thank you for your patience, obviously.
Very enjoyable to hear everybody.
Can you tell us about hyperspace lucidity? This is a fascinating, I'm going to say chapter and leave it at that, and have you explain more about what that is.
Well, first I need to give a little bit about my background.
Yes, please.
Before jumping into hyperspace lucidity, because it's within a particular context.
Good.
I see lucid dreaming as a practice, and I see it as a lifetime practice. And for me, I started to be totally conscious of it in a sense of being able to participate or co-participate in lucid dreaming since age very young. But it was particularly age 7 that happened. But these experiences I had in childhood sort of formed who I am today. So it sort of informed my whole life. And that's why I call it is a practice, and it's a personal practice. And of course, you know, I did write both my master thesis and PhD dissertation on the topic. Now, my master thesis was Experiencing the Divine in Lucid Dream State, and my PhD was Images of the Lucid Mind. Now, the first one, the master thesis, really brought me into this particular state of consciousness within lucid dreaming, where I'm calling it hyperspace lucidity. And that came out of, I did that quantitative research, scientific. That was when I was working in a sleep laboratory at Stanford with Stephen LaBerge. And at the time, I have to say, by the way, it's a delight to see lucid dreaming sort of in the mainstream. Everybody talks about it. Whereas in the 80s, when we were working in the laboratory, when we would go to conferences and talked about lucid dreaming, we were very much, we were very, how would I say, people really, even in the field of dream studies, people were not paying attention to lucid dreaming. So it was really a hard time to try to convince people about this phenomenon, let alone convince that there's such a thing, such experiences as void, as shamanic practices in lucid dreaming, as meditation, as hyperspace lucidity. It was very, very difficult to convince them about lucid dreaming, let alone these experiences. So for me, this hyperspace lucidity happened because I did many dream incubation myself when I was doing my study on spiritual experiences in lucid dreaming, and also other people who were part of the study. They were having some experiences beyond the sort of the normal narrative of a dream. They were going beyond that threshold, so to speak. Phenomena of light was part of it. Phenomena of void was part of it. Void and light They each have, when we go inside of them, they all have their own subset of experiences. They are not all the same. So I decided to not use a psychological term for it, because every word we use, there's some pre-assumption about what that word is about. So I like to go outside of psychological terms sometimes to term something. So hyperspace lucidity, it felt that it wasn't laden with either religion terms or psychological terms. So that's what I use. But it is experiences beyond space and beyond time. But within that experience, there are many layers of experiences, including the unity consciousness, being inside the void, being inside spaces that are unfamiliar, and within that layer, there are many, many, many other layers. So for my chapter, I decided actually to do a retrospective of my research, because I found that when I've lived long enough now to know that I'm a visionary, because whenever I would do something, people don't get it, and then 10 years later they get it. They get what I'm doing. So what I decided to do is to bring it all together as a retrospective. So the first study I did was highly scientific, hard science. Actually, I used quantitative research to do this study. And the theme is the same throughout all of my research. And my interest is, what if we ask the big question when we are in a lucid dream? What happens? How does our mind respond when we ask the big existential question? And I'm interested to just witness, to see what the mind presents. And I take it that the mind is much, much more complex than we know it is, because I'm a lucid dreamer. So I've had the experience, and I'm sure that the panelists, they all have had the experience, they know that. I tend to take the indigenous way of approaching it too. Maybe because of my cultural background, maybe because of my 30 years of studying shamanism and being with the shamanic communities, or maybe because of my 10 years of study with Tibetan Buddhists about dream yoga. However, I have sort of did my development within this topic. It led me to certain people and certain paths, and those paths, they all do warn about what Shayne was talking about. There's all these warnings there about how to proceed when you want to go deeper and deeper into this state of consciousness. And I think that when one is taking lucid dreaming seriously, it's really taking it as a whole practice. It's not just that, well, I want to go and have a lucid dream, but it's looking at the whole psychological, emotional, and physical. That's all part of it. So that's in my chapter, I focused on the different way in which, different methodology in which I approached the same topic. And often people think that I'm just, she's a painter. But, I'm painting because it's a mode of communication. When words fall short in description, when we say this experience is ineffable, then I go into images. Then I go into shamanic sounds and drumming and other things. It's the way of trying to really get inside that experience, sometimes even bringing it into waking and experiencing it there. So that's why I use art. It's like a tool. It's like a communication tool that I use. In the chapter, I went from the hardcore scientific quantitative research to qualitative research, and then I went to art-based research. And the last chapter is very hard to understand right now, but I think that later on is going to come about, because how could an installation be scientific?
Yeah.
But it is scientific, because the way I install the show, and then people come and say, oh, I feel something. Well, then I ask, well, how do you feel? What is it that is invoking in you? So that's, to me, is that art-based research is as valid as qualitative. Well, it's a qualitative research, but it's addressing different things.
Right. You know, I find it so interesting. Yes, hyperspace is not, it's not a psychological term, it's not a religious term, but it manages to place your concept of lucid practice, a lifetime practice, in a very culturally specific context, which is because hyperspace is all about science fiction. I mean, if you look at, you know, when people, they think of Star Wars or Star Trek, and it's this sort of Futurama kind of a thing. And so it's funny to me that, yes, it comes from math and physics, but most people understand it in the terms of this very strong cultural myth of, I would say, maybe the last 50, 100 years or so. So I don't know if you thought about that, but it actually seems somewhat appropriate.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I came up with the idea of hyperspace when I was listening to a talk in a lucidity conference a long time ago. Someone it spaced me right now who the name of the person was. It will come to me. He was giving some talks around physics and dreaming, and then at the time, this was 1990 or 1991. It wasn't into the internet and all the talk about hyperspace now is everywhere, but it wasn't so used then. It was just used a little bit. So I used it, but then I sort of stuck with the term. But I get amused by it, you know how it's used, and but for me is any terminology you use there is laden with different kind of meaning. Like for instance, we talked about Claire was talking about, and earlier we were talking about void.
Yes.
Now void is within the Buddhist tradition has a particular meaning. No, in other traditions might have particular meaning. Light would have a certain kind of inner light, might have certain kind of connotations, and then it limits sometimes certain experiences or certain certain experiences. But one thing I wanted to mention is that I noticed everyone who was giving a talk, that I was so delighted, and I was delighted when I saw Ryan's book and I read some of the chapters in here, is that now, because there's so many people are interested in lucid dreaming, and they are also sharing their own personal experiences, and they're going farther with what is in literature, that shows to me, as someone who has done so many years of personal and worked with many people, I've been teaching lucid dreaming since '84, so you can imagine how many students I've had, that there is a reality there, because whatever is today, whoever said about, they all are really true reality within lucid dreaming. Like what Claire talked about, your thought makes an action, it just manifests. It's true. You try it and it happens. But I think that the more people share their experiences, we can understand the theme, that there is a phenomena there, that there's a phenomena that we all share, and it has a particular reality. But I think that indigenous people have explored it for so many years, and they know it. I see shamanism as science. You know, I've been drumming for 30 years, and I know it's a science. Shamanic drumming is a science, because if you beat for about 9 minutes, 4 to 7 beats per second, the brain wave changes from alpha. You start going from beta to alpha brain wave, and then bursts of theta brainwave. So you know that they have practiced this for thousands of years, and they know it, and they really, really worked with it, and they know what these experiences can do and are about. That's why they're a little bit cautious who they share it with. They want to make sure that the person is well practiced, because it's giving something that it might have some other consequences with it. So it's I'm more in that camp. It's like if people want to learn lucid dreaming, there is many different layers about it, but I think that let's look at it in a much larger context, not just, oh, I want to go and have a lucid dream.
Right.
In my classes, I always say, well, it's all about lucid waking. Are we ready to wake up now, here, in every levels in our life,
right.
relationship, work, everything? It
Right.
transforms. So it's a much bigger practice than we might imagine it is.
Ah, lovely. Thank you, Fariba. That was very insightful. I have so many questions that we could keep going on this, but I know got to wrap up in a few minutes. But I wanted to just go through and ask a more general question, and the reason why I'm asking it is this. I mean, so I've gone far and, near and far and searching in different cultures and different spiritual traditions and so on and so forth. And to me, the litmus test of any group is always, how good is the life, right? It's not necessarily how esoteric are the practices or what is the promise, but, how are people really living? Is this a generous culture, like Shayne, in your chapter you talked about, or is this an ethical person, courageous, giving, and so on and so forth, community-minded? And I guess what I'm interested in asking each of you is just a quick little thought on how to stay healthy, like how lucid dreaming, I mean, we've talked some about how it can throw us off balance or make us come back into balance, but I guess what I'm asking is, what's interesting you at this moment in around lucid dreaming and health? And it could be personal health, like how to maintain personal health, or it could be family health or the health of communities. What gets us to be vibrant and resilient individuals and societies? Hope that's broad enough. And Ryan, I wanted to start with you, since you've been sitting there listening all this time.
Cool. It's a great question, and it's something I've given a lot of thought to over the years. Actually, like Shayne, I had a spell of bad nightmares that cleansing is what really did the trick. And I was actually in the middle of a very intense lucid dreaming incubation that was lasting months. This was what my master's thesis was on. And I hit a period of very powerful dreams that were beyond my ability to comprehend them. I wasn't integrating them. And I began to somatize the imagery. And because this is the internet and forever, let's talk about my indigestion. Essentially, my digestive system kind of broke down for for a period of a week or longer, and it was terrible. And I realized, and I'm so lucky because I actually had a container of spiritual advisors, one of whom was Fariba, about what should I do in this kind of situation, and my advisors told me, you basically need to cleanse in a number of ways. Nature, getting out of nature, watching what your food intake is doing, backing off from the practices, grounding yourself, kind of coming back, to the ground a little bit. And I did fast, and then I did a salt cleanse, and at the end of it, it came time to eat again, and I had a series of powerful lucid dreams that answered the questions that the earlier nightmares had posed in a healing, very healing way. That was personally healing and absolutely just kind of rippled through my life. I think I'll be probably looking at these dreams, for decades. They're very powerful. And so that really woke me up to this concept of lucid dreaming as powerful medicine. And I think that is the overall arching theme, that one of the themes that you can really bring out of this volume, the second volume of the Lucid Dreaming collection, is that between the nocebo effects and their wonderful creative in healing purposes, you have to take it seriously. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote an ebook about some of this, and it's the Lucid Immersion Guidebook, and I wrote that in 2012. And I basically used that experience, my negative experience, and what I learned through lucid dreaming scholars about how to set a secure container for doing lucid dreaming. It's basically taking lucid dreaming seriously as a psycho-spiritual practice, knowing when's the right time to delve in, knowing when to back off, having a support network in place when you decide to do this. It's kind of like, it's risky to go into the underworld, just like it's risky to go solo backpacking. But we have the urge to do it anyway. But when we go solo backpacking, we tell our friends where we're going to be camping and when we're going to be returning. And this is something that we need to be doing with our dreams as well. So I don't, when I think about some of the work that came out of Shayne's experiences in Diana Raboli's chapter, which is another chapter which talks about how lucid dreaming is involved with dark sorcery around the world. To me, this isn't meant to scare the world into, oh, lucid dreaming is creepy, but rather that it's strong and we need to take it seriously. And that's what I teach in the Lucid Immersion Guidebook is basically how to set those parameters, set a strong container. And part of that, which I think we've also talked about in this conversation, is about knowing about your own beliefs and having explored them, and having your own ways of calming yourself down and having a relaxation response, knowing what to do when it hits the fan. What can you lean into? These are really important questions to have answered.
Wow, great. That's really fabulous. Thank you so much. Claire, what would you say, and again, your thumbnail sketch, something about health and dreaming?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by the healing potential of lucid dreams. I'm writing a book now on lucid dreaming, and 3 of my chapters are dedicated to healing because I just couldn't stop. The psychological healing, physical healing of yourself, and then physical healing of others. Just investigating, well, what's possible, and listening to what other people have done in their lucid dreams, and contributing my own experience too. Now, there are so many areas I could go into, so I'll just mention a couple briefly. I'm very interested in the dream body. What we do in the dream body can have an effect on our waking body. And I think the most powerful lucid dreams for me in terms of healing have been dreams where I have experienced healing in my dream body, a sort of buzzing kind of yoga energy. And I've woken up in my bed, and the energy has been in my physical body. It's still there. And I think for me, that's a sign, really, that the lucid dream has done some very deep cellular work on me in some sense. And you really, after a dream like that, things change. It's like a switch has been flipped. And the path to healing and wholeness has sort of opened up again. So the dream body, very important. Also, I think in terms of being a healthier person or a more compassionate person, I think engaging with dream figures can help you with this, because well, it depends what your outlook is, but if you take the psychological approach that everything in the dream is part of yourself, dream violence becomes kind of pointless. You sort of tend to want to have more of a conversation with your dream figures, talk to them, work things out. And I think generally our dreaming mind, not just lucid dreams, but dreams in general, the dreaming mind is, if we would allow it to be, it could be like our best friend, our wisest friend, the friend that's always there to help us towards greater wholeness and healing. And I think there are so many dreams which warn of illness, and if they're ignored, well, the illness is going to progress, But if we're in contact with our dreaming minds, and lucid dreaming helps this contact because we become conscious in the dream, then we can work towards healing of the body as well. There's so many reports of people who have just known from a dream that they've got cancer somewhere in their body, and they've gone to the doctor and asked for a biopsy, and the doctor said, no, there's nothing there, there's no need for it. And then they have an even more precise dream showing exactly where the doctor has to put the biopsy needle, and they tell this to the doctor and make the doctor do it. And yes, they find the cancer. I mean, it's all about learning to listen. And so lucid dreaming really allows us to have this conversation with a very deep, wise part of ourselves. And I think that in itself, if we engage in this conversation, then we're bound to be on this path to greater health and wholeness.
Oh, that's great. It's very important, just learning to listen. Yeah. No agenda, just listening. I like that.
That's right, yes.
Thanks.
And I mean, lucid dreams, they do wake you up in your life. The more awake you become in your life, the more awake you become in your dreams. Yeah. And as I said earlier, with meditation in lucid dreams, you go deep so fast in a lucid dream because you don't have the usual distractions of pain, the physical body. And that helps your daily meditation practice. So it's much easier to go into a deep state of relaxation, and that's also a healing state. And lucid dreaming, I think, for me as well, I think it helps me to recognize beauty more in my waking life, because in a lucid dream, there's so much beauty. I mean, if you look at things, the details, the colors, the shapes, the feel of it all, it's multi-sensory, it's just amazing. And so I find much more in my waking life that I have moments of waking lucidity just looking or experiencing things. So that's a constant reminder to wake up and to notice beauty. And when you notice beauty, you tend to feel happier because it's lovely. So I've found it really helpful to get deeply into lucid dreaming. It's definitely helped me to become happier and healthier, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Claire. Want to ask Shayne, where are you at with this question? Having had such intense experience and moving through it, what's your thoughts on dreams and health, whether personal or collective?
That's a really tough question. But I think it's, of course, relative to each person. Claire sounds to me like a really... I haven't met somebody so in touch with their dreams. So it's very... You seem very like an integrated person. And I think your happiness in your waking life translates into the kind of dreams that you're able to have, which sound really amazing. But I think a different person like me at that very stressful time, the stress and anxiety of my waking life translated into the dream state. So the relationship, I think, between health and dreaming is a very mutually responsive relationship. So
yeah, I mean, having said, could I?
Sorry, no, Claire, I'm sorry. We have to keep moving.
Oh, okay, all right. We'll talk another time. We'll talk another time.
Can I finish with just an anecdote? Is it?
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, for example, one night I had one of those lucid dreams where I asked the big existential question that Fariba was talking about. I looked up in the sky and I was like, send me a message or something like that. I can't remember exactly what I said, but from the sky, I saw, like from the starry sky, a sweat lodge like slowly floated down to the ground into the forest in the distance. So I walked over there and I went in, I crawled in. I remember very vividly, I was like, wow, this is, going to be something, right? Who's in there? So I went into the sweat lodge and I waited. And I heard somebody outside, and then they came in. And it was a guy in raggedy clothes with a bottle of whiskey in his hand. I was like, you're not supposed to be in here with alcohol? That's totally like unacceptable. There's a rule that you're not supposed to go to a sweat lodge unless you've been clean from substance like alcohol or drugs or anything like that for 4 days minimum. So I was like, you're not supposed to be in here, and he got kind of aggressive. So we went outside, and I told him to go away, but he left, and he came running back at me with his bottle in his hand. He was going to whap me on the head, and luckily I blocked him, and I did like a judo throw, and that was that dream was over. But I woke up, and I realized that before I went to bed, I was drinking alcohol, and the message seemed to be, you know, when you can't pose those big questions in your dream if you have been drinking, you know, because you're supposed to be clean before you go on this kind of spiritual quest, you know, or ask these big questions in your dream. So anyway, the relationship, I think, between my waking self and my dream self was very apparent at that time. That, you know, if your waking body is healthy and you're vitalized and taking care of yourself and healthy, then your dream state will probably respond to that. But if you're, you know, doing things which either consciously or subconsciously, you know, are not right or not healthy for your body, then it's going to respond in your dreams, whether or not you take the psychological or the you know, fully kind of spiritual perspective on what the dream space is.
And also, I mean, you have that beautiful image of your dream as a sweat lodge. You know, the dreaming mind as this sweat lodge is sort of this macrocosm, microcosm of consciousness in this little specific place. That's a lovely dream, Shayne.
Yeah, but it turned out not so good when I got to block a guy from smashing me over the head with a beer or a whiskey bottle.
That's when judo comes in handy. So
yeah,
so, you know, talk about preparation for lucid dreaming. All right, so Fariba, I want to turn to you before we leave. And what are your thoughts about dreams and health?
Well, I agree with Claire that they are incredibly helpful for all sorts of different bodily healing, and there are many anecdotes around especially lucid dreaming. I have to say, I always encourage my students who are doing dissertation to focus on dreams and healing, because that area needs to be really expanded, because we have many examples of it. From my point of view, I don't see all dreams, they're all big dreams, or all important dreams. I see there are specific dreams, there are different types of dreams. And that's very important to me, because often we talk about dreams so general. And for me, it has a lot to do with trust and awareness. Having a deep trust in this state of consciousness that we spend every night there, that when we are deeply connected with it, there are those messages that comes through, precognitive messages around health and healing. And then awareness. For me, the practice of lucid dreaming has a lot to do with how we can become aware in waking. So once that awareness, that self-reflectiveness happens both in lucid dreaming and in waking, we will see this amazing doors opening up in waking that makes us more and more aware of our well-being, and however that is around health, because there are psychological health, there are emotional health, there are physical health. I mean, that's a big question you're asking, just really going in depth into what do we mean by health. Right. There are many different levels of health. But I think that is that self-reflectiveness coming in waking and in dreaming, it's the first step for us to even question the inquiry. It's very, very important. It's about what is this state of consciousness that is so extraordinary, and there are so many people having these experiences. How about if I explore it a little bit? I think I'm going in. I'm so sorry. I live in the countryside, so then I'm getting off and on with the internet. So
I think the picture on this end is fine.
Okay, so so for me, it's awareness and really self-reflecting about what's happening in waking, and seeing what areas in one's life that needs healing. Because it might, might be really fit physically, but it might be something emotional or something psychological but just really questioning. So for me, inquiry is a lot relates to lucid dream practice. A lot of inquiry, and then see what happens. So I can't really say what. Yes, dreams are for health and healing. But yes, they do come, but we have to look at all the different layers and levels. In my book Integral Dreaming with Danielle Delorier, we really expanded the complexity of dream studies. It's not simple; it's really complex. So I think these questions are wonderful questions to look at its complexity, and how dreams are complex because we are complex, and the way we approach dreams needs to be multi-layered. So that's for me is the way I look at it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think you're right. I think all of these conversations we're having here in the 21st century are really introductory. We're just sort of opening the question, and I think taking the long view is absolutely right. This is on our quest to become more fully human, whatever that means. Hopefully it means something good. Thank you all for your contributions. And we've been talking about lucid dreaming, new perspectives on consciousness in sleep. And want to thank Ryan Hurd, Clare Johnson, Shayne Dahl, and Fariba Bogzaran for joining me today. And I know we've gone a little over what we usually spend on these, but I think it's just been a really rich conversation. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.